Hi friends, welcome. My name is Baron and this is my channel where I talk about some book stuff. I'm the Book Baron. Welcome in. So today I am doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I think technically I'm like maybe a week early, but I was just kind of excited to film it, so this is what we're doing today. So for anyone who isn't aware, the mid-year book freakout tag is like a series. I think it's like a 14 questions. I've seen slightly different variations. I'm using the same one I used last year. I'll leave all the questions in the description box below in case you would like to inventory these questions for yourself. It covers a lot of different things, the highs, the lows, the great new finds, a little bit of everything. But let's just jump into things and start off with the very first question, which is always the hardest to answer. And that is best book you've read so far this year. This one was really hard for me to narrow down. There are a couple of different books that I'll mention throughout this that I kind of wanted to put as this one, but I landed on that it has to be an Elle Mitchell book. I don't know what it is about her writing, but she always brings the feelings. And the two books in particular of hers that stand out for me are A Little Unstable, which I just recently read, and Carved in Scars, which we read for the Tainted Love Book Club, I think a couple months back. They're sort of interconnected because they take place in the same town in Washington State. They've got a similar feel in that they're new adult, small town, bully romances. They've got a heroine that's kind of got this like sadness to her. She's either been neglected or abused or in some way a little bit unloved. I think Carved in Scars, when it comes to a plot, definitely wins because it has a murder mystery. It's a little bit darker, it's a little bit more intense. But I think where A Little Unstable shines a little bit more is the fact that it's a toxic romance, but it's realistically toxic, which sort of makes it more sinister. It's also got a really great depiction of bipolar disorder to the point that I was like, oh, this is so interesting. They remind me so much of this person that's in my life. Then when the diagnosis was revealed, I was like, oh my gosh, that just makes sense because that loved one that I was thinking of has bipolar disorder and it presents very, very similarly to this character. And I think ultimately the reason I really did land on A Little Unstable as my favorite of the two, I mean, one, I just read it more recently, so it's a little bit more fresh, but two, that's one that I feel like if someone said that they didn't like it, it would personally hurt my feelings. Not to say that it's like above critique, but it's definitely one of those that it's like, it just hits personally because I feel like they would be critiquing like a part of me. So I think we're gonna land with A Little Unstable as my favorite read so far this year. The next question is best sequel you've read so far this year, and that has to go to A Cage of Ice and Echoes by Pam Godwin. This is even better than Hills of Shivers and Shadows, which is a why choose captor captive, takes place up in the Alaskan bush, so there's a little bit of a survival element, but I feel like this sequel was tighter. It wasn't as long. There wasn't very many lulls. There was so much great relationship development, and we got a lot more going with the mystery. We got so much information throughout the course of the book, and then that killer cliffhanger like Pam Godwin is liking to do in this series. I just felt like I got a lot of the things that I was really looking for from the series, and it didn't feel that like slumpy downtime, anything like that. I think a lot of times the second book in a trilogy or in a series tends to have that like sophomore slump. It tends to be a little bit slower. It feels like a filler book. And I felt like this one actually contributed even more to the plot and the character development than the first book did. So that's by far my favorite sequel I've read. New releases that I haven't read yet, but I want to. I have a couple of different ones. I've kind of been bad about tracking new releases lately, so I feel like I'm a little bit out of the loop with some of that. I've had a lot going on with work. You can't do it all. But the two that are coming to mind at the moment is Shadowland Omega by Elizabeth Stevens. It's a dystopian fantasy MF Omegaverse, and it's the second book that's going to be released in her Dark City Omega series. I can't remember what that series is actually called, but that's the first book. I loved that one because it was like sexy and tension filled, and I thought the hero was just very hot. I think I binged that book in a day, so that's definitely one that I want to get to. I think I want to try and read it on audio though, so I need to get my library system figured out first. As you may or may not be aware, Seattle Public Library got hacked. So I'm having a little bit of an issue getting audiobooks, so I might wait until my library comes back online to read it that way. So hopefully I'll be able to get to that soon, but for right now, those reading plans are kind of on hold. And then the other one is Wristlocked by A.K. Blythe. I don't actually know what their name is. It's either Love Triangle or Polly. I think this is fully Polly. It's like some people that perform in a circus. It's like a new adult, darker book. So I thought that that sounded really interesting. I haven't read anything from this author because this is this author's debut, but I've been really curious about it. I've been seeing a lot of edits floating around about it. So I just thought the premise sounded a little bit unique and fun. So I think those are the two that I'm most excited to get to. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So there's so many that I've been tracking, but once again, I haven't been as good lately about tracking unless I'm like particularly excited about them. But the two that come to mind, well, actually there's 3. We'll do 3. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep it to 1, but let's share the love, shall we? The first one is Green Lights by Jessie Hall, and that is coming out beginning of August. I think it's August 6th. I think the reason I'm so excited for it is because it's step sibling, and she has been edging us, I think, for the past year. The reels that have been going around look so fun and so hot. There's just been a building of tension with that book. I'm ready to read it finally. So that'll be coming out beginning of August. And then beginning of September, I think September 9th, Elle Mitchell's releasing another book, and it's a little bit of a departure from her other stuff. It's called Pretty Poison. It's a poly rock star romance, but I've heard that she still delivers on the emotion, which is what I love reading her for. So although I'm not a huge why choose person, I just have the feeling that Elle Mitchell isn't like writing to the trope. She's been posting about the fact that like the beta readers are like, you promised it wasn't going to be that emotional, and it still was. And that's what I love her for. So I'm thinking that this is going to be a winner for me. Plus I just like her writing, right? A lot of times the reason I don't like Why Choose is because it's just like schlong everywhere for the sake of it, and nobody's really like adding a lot to the story. You know what I mean? I want to give that one a go. And then Candy Steiner is releasing another book in her Red Zone Rival series, and it's All Start, and it's the character that it's centered around is one that I have loved throughout. He's got golden retriever energy. He's the clown. So I want to get to that one as well, but I don't know the release.
And this poor little thing doesn't know the release date because this book actually already released, so this is technically in the wrong category, but it's worth a mention all the same. Also, not only is this a continuation of probably my favorite new adult college romance of all time, this one is taking place in Seattle, and I could not be more stoked. So, all the more reason that I absolutely need to read this book.
All right. Next up, we have biggest disappointment. Here's the tricky thing about biggest disappointment. It means that you have to have had expectations going into the book. And a lot of the times I don't have a ton of expectations. However, there was one that I think really stood out for this category, and that is Underlock by Mariana Zapata. Mariana Zapata is like an auto-buy, an auto-read author. I rarely rate anything she's written under 4 or 5 stars. She's very consistent for me, but I really didn't like this book. You could see a lot of the beginnings of her formula kind of like coming together. We have grumpy sunshine, quirky average girl, big broody man, but I think that some of the darker elements that were kind of shoehorned in just didn't really work because this is really just a contemporary, and there's sort of like some motorcycle club stuff like brought in, and I felt like usually I can understand in the long term why Mariana's heroes are grumpy. There's usually a reason where I'm like, oh, they have something going on in their personal life. They're leery of this person. Like, I usually understand. In this case, I just felt like he was honestly kind of a jerk, and that didn't really endear me to him. And her heroine was like quirky to the max. It wasn't like a realistic someone just trying to see the positives in life. It's a little bit too much. But like I said, I could kind of see the origins of what she would become. For that reason, it was kind of cool to read. But honestly, for the most part, I was just like, I'm shocked that this is the same author. This book honestly kind of scared me off of the rest of her backlist. It just wasn't that good. All right, next up is Biggest Surprise. And that has to go to For the Fans by Nyla Kay. So I was really nervous about this book. I put it as a priority read because I kept seeing it in everyone's wrap. Everyone was talking about how much they love it. I would talk about the fact that I hadn't read it, and I would get messages on messages from people excited for me to read this book. I have a horrible track record of not liking a lot of the things that are popular right now in books. And not to say I dislike them, it's usually just like, I just don't love them. Like, I feel very lukewarm. And so I was very concerned that this is what was going to happen here. I loved this book. I loved it. It was just as good as everyone was saying. That almost never happens for me. So I think that's really what made it a surprise. I mean, I constantly think about rereading this. The two main characters in this are like the definition of soulmates. Like these two are meant to be together. And I loved the fact that there was so much tension throughout the book. Although there was still a lot of spice, and the spice does happen pretty early on, the tension was kept, and the relationship, because the intimacy was so slow to develop, it almost felt slow burn. That's a really hard thing for authors to pull off, and I think just because of the length, this is a chunky boy, that definitely helped, but she absolutely nailed this book. Like, I adore these two as a couple. Next up, we have new favorite author, and I'm gonna do two for this one. So the first one obviously has to go to Elle Mitchell. She is absolutely hands down the only author that seems to really pull emotion out of me. A lot of times when I read an emotional scene, I understand it from a more objective lens, or I can kind of follow the logic of like why someone would feel that way. But a lot of times, even if I'm really involved in the story and really feel for the characters, and I just don't really connect with the emotional side of books often, but there's something about the way she writes her characters that I just really identify with. And so it really pulls emotion out of me. Plus, she writes one of my favorite tropes, which is bully romance. I've always been hesitant to pick up her books every time I do, because I'm like, well, maybe that was a one-off, or that was the two that I liked and the rest won't. I'm on my third book and I still love everything she writes. So she's definitely like a new auto-buy author for me. And then the other one is Milena Mackay. She is spectacular because she is one of those authors that has a formula down that works perfectly. She writes sapphic age gap romances that usually take place in the workplace. I don't like workplace romance, but they're usually unique workplaces. So like at a private boarding school, in a Hollywood studio, or fashion designers in Paris. It's always a lot more interesting than just like people answering emails. She has the best ice queens. They are so multidimensional, but also mysterious. And I just love her characters. Honestly, her ice queens a lot of times end up outshining the other characters. So that's when you know you've really nailed it. All right. Newest fictional crush. This one was kind of hard because whoever the hero or heroine was in the previous book is usually my latest fictional crush, assuming that I liked the book. But the two that I kind of landed on that really felt memorable, especially after some time has passed, one was Rook from The Truths We Burn. He's a damaged boy. He's like a softie at heart, but he seems big and bad, and he kind of sees through the heroine's facade that she's put up, and he loves to get under her skin, but also he can be hurt because this boy wants to be loved. I just like that kind of like hard, tough exterior. He's got that sense that he knows everything, but also like that softy interior. Delightful. The other one that came to mind is the Berserker from Dark City Omega. There was just something about how he talked to Echo that was very sexy. It might have been the accent in the audiobook, to be honest. I just loved how he was like so into her and wanted to protect her, but also was still very like tough and protective. And it kind of reminded me of like the shapeshifter romances that I used to read in high school, where it's like that tough but soft. I think we're sensing a theme here. But those were the two that came to mind. Newest favorite character. So, I mean, we could talk about any of the heroines probably in any of the Elle Mitchell books that I've mentioned thus far, but to give you some variety, let's talk about two others that came to mind. The first one is Abel from Make Me Pretty. I think he's just a really unique character. He's been through such a tough life. He's been in the foster system, and he really wants to be loved badly, but he also just hasn't had a lot. He doesn't have a lot of models for what loving someone looks like, and so his expression of that is a little messy as a result. Well, it's a lot messy. It's not a little messy, it's a lot messy. But he's also like very excited and appreciative of all these little things because he's just never had very much. And I like how he kind of like tries to get in under people's skin, and he can't figure out if he wants people to be like gentle or rough with him, because he kind of wants both at the same time. And he was just a really intriguing character, and I can tell that he's gonna have like a pretty big character arc throughout the series, because what happened at the end of this book, that will change him. The other character that I thought of was Cherry from Below the Pulse. You know I love a sad girl. Give me a sad girl over a sunshiny girl any day of the week. I will always identify with that more than a sunshiny gal. I just really loved Cherry because she had a specific quality that I think we don't see a lot in heroines, which it was the fact that she would rather pull away than ask for what she wanted out of a situation, because she just didn't want to be disappointed or let down. She was going to remove herself as a way of kind of giving her control, because she had just never had romantic situations work out for her before. I feel like we don't see that a lot with heroines, and I think there's a lot of us that do that in real life. There was something about that I just felt like just really humanized her as a character. All right, next up we have a book that made you cry. Before, I used to have to just say whatever made me misty-eyed, and for that we could talk about more elemental books once more, but I do actually have not one, but now 2 books that have made me cry. They've happened in rapid succession, so the adrenal fatigue from being under a massive amount of stress from my job may be a contributing factor. However, here we are. So I actually have books for this one. Do not look at the Target sticker. I cannot get it off. Thank you so much. Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was one that I was like, maybe I'm just overworked. Maybe it's the depression talking. Maybe it's that adrenal fatigue from the chronic stress. But the book is pretty emotional. So I think what really got me with this book was the fact that you have 2 people that want to be together, but you have one that emotionally can't handle it. You have another that realistically, the circumstances aren't the best for starting a relationship. So it's a little bit of the right person, wrong time. And that just hurts so bad. It's not that they dislike the person or they've done something wrong. It's literally that they're incompatible in this moment. And I think those little moments of rejection just hurt so bad. Now, I actually have another one that I sobbed through, I would say about 25% of this book. Once again, the work stress might be getting to me, but you know, here we are. So the other one that made me cry was Ecstasy by KV Rose. Now, this is not one that I thought I would cry over at all. In fact, I thought all the characters kind of suck. I don't even know if I'd call them gray, but they were kind of all unsympathetic in different ways. None of them were really worth rooting for, especially in the beginning. And they sort of go through these like character roller coasters that eventually turn into an arc. But there is a point where one of the characters has to really start confronting their demons. That scene got me because there's this emotional tension that is so high and doesn't let up for several chapters. This character is really forced to confront a lot about themselves, despite the fact that they really don't want to and aren't really ready. It really just made me like sympathetic to like a messier version of myself. I think we've all had a messy era. I am no exception, but it also just reminded me of a lot of girls that I knew in college. Kind of made me wonder where they were at and if things worked out for them. That one kind of got to me in a way that I wasn't really expecting, but nonetheless, I think that one I might have cried over regardless. Right, a book that made you happy. Oh no, I have a copy of it and I guess I didn't pull it, but it's The Headmistress by Melina Mackay. This was just so fun. Like I said, I love an ice queen in my stories. This was so hot. It had a little bit of a mystery, so there's plot going on. There was this slow burn of the relationship because these circumstances don't actually really allow them to do a lot because there's a power imbalance. One of them's a headmistress, one of them is a teacher working for the school. I just found myself smiling throughout this book because they would have like a little moment of thinking of each other and then have that fun kind of like murder. It's not a murder mystery because no one's dead, but like someone's trying to murder. So that part's a mystery. It was just one of those, it was an unexpected surprise. I loved it so much. And it was like that first book that introduced me to Melina Mackay, and I haven't stopped reading her since. All right, number 12, most beautiful book you have acquired this year. Just to be frank with you, I always feel very weird about showing special editions because once they have the order, like you can't purchase them again. And so then showing them off just feels weird because then if you're watching this and you see it and you're like, that's beautiful, like you can't get it unless you go through a reseller, and the resale market is awful. So I just don't want to create any demand there. All that to say, I'm not going to show a special edition because I think I don't know, it just feels wrong. It just feels wrong to me for some reason, not to judge anyone that does. It's just like one of those things that like gets me. Okay, I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I'm just going to show you the book that I'm thinking of, but these are like regular edition books that I just think are really pretty. It's the Stay With Me series by Nicole Fiorina, and specifically the hardcover books. They already have a very cool dust jacket. I think these are very well done. I think what really makes them stand out, however, is the naked hardback is also printed and looks so pretty. And the chapter headers, or like right before them, kind of have all these like pretty, almost like floral wallpaper. before each of them. And I just think that that's like really cool that so much love and care clearly was like put into these. All of them in the series look like that, right? So we've got this one. I just love this like burlap texture that this one's got. But this one also has like a fun naked hardback. So I just think that that series is really pretty, and I can just tell that a lot of effort was put into these books, and they just have that like dark artsy look to them that I really, really like. All right, number 13 is what books do you need to read before the end of the year? I'm gonna list a couple of them, so hang on to your hats, folks. The first one, I need to read something from Pepper Winters. I don't care what it is. If it's Tears of Tess, if it's Luna Mare, if it's Boy and His Ribbon, whatever that book is called. I just need to read something from her because I haven't read anything from her, and I feel like I'm missing out on all of her books. All of her books look so good. I just need to pick one up. So I'm going to by the end of the year. I don't know why I had a whole meltdown over that. The next one that I'm hopefully gonna read in the next month, fingers crossed. Feathers So Vicious by Liv Xander. Oh, actually, you know, as far as pretty books go, the paperbacks off of Amazon have this like faux sprayed edges, but it's like a digital print. Can you kind of see the edge of that there? So that's another pretty one for you. Anyway, back to what I was saying. This is one that I keep needing to have as like my next read. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pick that one up. After I get done reading this book, I'm gonna pick up that book because it's supposed to be like dark captive, I think, fantasy romance. I want to get back into fantasy. I think this book is beautiful. I've heard nothing but good things. It's been all over my Instagram. This is me trying to hold myself accountable. Oh, and finally, Tattered Bodies by Shea Ruby. I burned through the first two books, and I have this thing with series and with books that I will get like 75% of the way through like a series, and then I just won't read the last book. And it's because I don't want the series to be done. And I need to bite the bullet and just actually finish the series before I have to do a full reread of the series because I've completely forgot what it's about. This is me holding me accountable once again. All right, and number 14. Last year I didn't answer this. This year I have an answer. And that's favorite book to movie adaptation. I don't watch a ton of movies, but I did recently watch Dune Part 2, and I thought that was pretty good. So I guess that's my favorite. I mean, it's beautifully shot, and who doesn't like gazing upon the face of Zendaya? With all of that, that is my mid-year book freakout tag. I would love to hear from you. Answer any of these questions or all of these questions. I want to know what's your favorites, what surprised you, what disappointed you, what you need to get to. Answer any and all of the questions. I would love to know how your reading is going so far this year. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it, subscribe if you want more content from me, and I really, really hope that I see you on my next video. Bye-bye.